could have been the kid. I see you smiling, but you shouldn't.
He was blind.
He was, well, because I said, I know what he's thinking. This diabolical little kid figured this all out and did this. Then the diabolic kid who poisoned his dog, you know what I mean? The fall wasn't far.
Maybe he was...
I actually think I could make that jump, you know what I mean? Maybe a broken leg in there, but...
Hi, welcome to The Real Generation Gap. I'm B.J. Kang.
I'm Fred Satilli.
And today we're reviewing An Anatomy of a Fall. A fatal fall leads to a writer desperately trying to prove her innocence following the aftermath of her husband's death.
Well, BJ, marriage can only end in one of two ways: divorce or death. I know which is my favorite. Here we had a death. Do you think it was a murder? Do you think it was a suicide? Or was it just an accident?
I'm not entirely sure. There is a lot of very peculiar, very interesting factors to this case, but I think it was an accident. I do not think that it was a suicide, and I don't think it was a murder. I genuinely think that he hit his head or something, or he just fell out and he just died. Simple as that.
The movie started out with absolutely blasting music, louder than the dialogue, and it was really annoying to me, and I just thought it was really badly made. But then I found out I was wrong. The blasting music was a big part of the story. It's the first time you see where their marriage is really in trouble.
Yeah.
This is this guy's passive-aggressive thing. He's playing this really crappy music.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, intolerable.
Instrumental of a 50 Cent song, I believe. That's what they said.
She was a German.
Yeah.
He was a Frenchman.
Yeah.
She wanted to stay in Germany. He wanted to live in France. And so they compromised by speaking English all the time in the house to each other.
Yeah.
Who compromises that way? Let's both be uncomfortable.
Sometimes marriage has some give and take. Sometimes you have to do some compromise. And sometimes the best way for both people to be comfortable is to agree to both be uncomfortable.
Well, that really stinks. It really does. Now, let's get back to the case.
Okay.
Now, the woman says she was asleep, dead asleep, right, when this horrible tragedy happened, when something happened resulting in the dead husband. Now, their son and the seeing eye dog,
Daniel,
they were the ones to come upon the body.
Yeah.
Who was to say that the son didn't come home, go upstairs, his father was leaning over the thing, and he shoved him over?
So you're going to make the accusation that...
Not yet. Not yet. When you're analyzing stuff, everybody's could be, right? If there was no new tire tracks, those were the only people there, right? There's no new footprints. Those are the only people. It was the reporter girl, the mom, the dad, and the child, and the dog. Somehow that guy fell out, was pushed out, went out the window and fell. Everybody pretty much agrees that he went out the window and fell.
Yeah.
And the reason is because there was damage on his shed where he hit his head on the shed before he hit the ground.
Yeah.
So the trauma to the head was when he hit the shed, maybe, and then went and fell the rest of the way to the ground. Now, at that moment, to me, that child was a suspect. He was a suspect. Maybe I see you smiling, but you shouldn't.
He was blind.
He was 90% blind.
Okay.
He had instant access.
He mustered all 10% of his sight to murder his father?
We don't know that. They told us that he was that.
Okay.
But for all we know, maybe his sight was returning and he wasn't telling anybody. Just the way a guy in a wheelchair might not divulge the fact that he could walk so that he could kill somebody and say, I couldn't have gone there, I'm in a wheelchair, right?
Okay.
It's a murder. It's a mystery. Be a detective. You just don't buy stuff. You think about everything. Obviously, she could have gone up there and walked right up to him because they're both not strangers.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't have fought that.
And Daniel was away too. There was no witnesses.
Right.
If she was
She could easily toss them off, bashed them in the head and tossed them off the thing. That was the easy, obvious thing, and that's pretty much what she was charged with.
Yeah.
But at the same time, could have been the kid. Kid and his father had a good relationship. His father homeschooled him. So it didn't seem like that might be the case. But that kid, what a fantastic actor he was. To me, when a kid does that, that's supernatural. For an adult to act, they can be trained.
It's expected of them.
But sure. And we got scads. I mean, we live in Hollywood. Every third person's a great actor.
Yeah.
So we're not impressed with that. But for a kid to do that, the reason I loved his acting was that he remained unbelievable. First of all, he was no child. His responses were measured. They were thought out. They were philosophical. He handled the police really well. And so I said, this kid's got a really hard working mind. Maybe he wanted the family acrimony to end. He had a crime of opportunity. Maybe his father halfway fell out or whatever. And he went, you know what? There you go.
So you're also suggesting that he was almost a master manipulator, that he was able to manipulate the authorities.
I was with that.
Okay.
I was with that throughout the movie. In fact, by the middle of the movie, he was my prime suspect.
What about him being out in the woods with his, guide dog?
We don't know the timelines. We don't know the timelines.
I mean, I guess his mom was sleeping. He could have went back.
He could have come to the house, seen his dad, tossed him off. I didn't discount him as the killer. I also didn't discount her lawyer, because her lawyer and she had an affair in the past, and it would have been kind of nice for him to get rid of that guy because he had some amount of affection for her.
I don't think they had an affair. The lawyer, I believe in the story, says that he had feelings for her at an earlier part of their life, but she did have an affair.
Well, there's emotional affairs and there's physical affairs.
Yeah, okay.
Right? Like Jimmy Carter said, I've lusted in my heart many times, right? It's always faithful to Rosalind. Two stories in one that are very parallel.
Yeah.
When they're trying to find out about what went wrong with the marriage, there's also a parallel court case going on. And I love your thoughts about that.
As much as the murder mystery element is fun to explore, this movie is not a murder mystery movie, I would say. This is a movie about examining, observing, intense scrutiny, investigation into basically a declining marriage. I connected that the title Anatomy of a Fall was very literal, that yes, they're trying to analyze and turn over every stone as to how this guy could have fallen from the building, but because they had to go into their marriage and go through very personal things, very private things that they said, and were even yelling to each other, they had to really dissect as well the decline of their marriage.
It was the fall of their marriage.
The anatomy
of the fall of a marriage.
Exactly.
Ended in death, as they well should.
Yeah.
Right.
So death does part.
Yeah. There was tremendous tension because of the close scrutiny.
Yeah.
There was an antagonist, and that was the prosecuting attorney.
Yeah.
And that guy, another great actor. He was as big a jerk as a real prosecuting attorney would be. He was an unbridled hitman. He was a guy determined to hurt her. He wasn't analyzing in court. He was very accusatory. He was creating these scenarios and assumptively closing them. This is how it happened. You did this. You said this. You did that.
Leading the witness, yeah.
Very much, yeah. Telling his fabricated story and then demanding that she admit to it. But the intensity of the court battle, the stress, she's got a stressful marriage. Now she's got a stressful life situation. Her soulmate is dead.
Yeah.
She's now a single mom. It's really bad.
Yeah. Not only that, but like the court battle, because they're questioning her about whether or not she killed him and her child's in the room. She's a single mother, and now the only person who's her family left is thinking, did my mom kill my dad? Did my mom really do this? That's an incredible strain to put on like the bond between a mother and her child, especially a single mother.
Yeah. What's he going to think of her, even if she's found not guilty?
Yeah.
What is he thinking? And that's what really tickled me, because I said, I know what he's thinking. This diabolical little kid figured this all out and did this. That's really what I thought. And if I was writing a horror movie, he would have been the diabolical kid, right? It would have been very easy for the movie to go that way. This movie could be made again, and he's the killer. Under
a different lens, it could be a sort of 80s campy slasher film where the kid did it.
And the reason I say that is he was no kid. He wasn't like a baseball playing, slingshot shooting, kind of a, happy tree climbing kid. That kid had a real intellect. And his interpretation of everything, when he was talking with his child custody court appointed, probably $200 an hour, child custody invader into the house there, the stuff that he said to her was not something a kid would say.
Yeah.
This is somebody who went to the divorce, the DV council, the domestic violence council, did some anger management courses, had some analysis, and he didn't have any of those things. He was just a kid.
Yeah.
And a blind kid at that with a dog.
Well, There's also the factor that, I mean, for one, his parents did say that like their love language was intellectual stimulation. He's out there in the middle of like nowhere, and he's just there with his parents. It makes sense that, you know, not being around other kids and just being with two, you know, brainiacs for parents, that he's a little bit smarter. But that's another factor to consider, is like this is all focused on them because they're just so detached from like the rest of the world around them. So it kind of has to hone in on their whole family life here.
Yeah, look at that. Look at that. That looks like the hills are alive with the sound of music, right?
Yeah,
they were way in the French Alps.
The cinematography was beautiful. Complete total utilization of the environment around them, you know.
It really was, wasn't it? And that was great because there was no music in this thing whatsoever. There was no soundtrack of note, just a instrumental version of a 50 Cent thing. Or, yeah.
That was definitely one thing I don't recall any music from this film. I'm wondering if maybe that was a deliberate choice to make it feel more, you know, grounded. Life doesn't have a soundtrack. It was very static. I said this in my notes that the film is very static. It's very subtle. It takes a lot of patience to sit through because yes, there is that murder mystery element, but this is
there's tension.
Yeah, but the tension comes from this family having to be put under the spotlight as they try to figure out what happened to the dad. But did they have any motivations? You know, was there any sort of trouble that might have caused any of them to hurt the father?
The story changes.
Yeah.
So when they first question the woman, she doesn't really want to tell them all this horrible stuff, that they had fights and, you know, that they hit each other and stuff like that. Yeah. She had the bruise, right? And, I hit the table. Well, you know, her story changed. Then the diabolic kid who poisoned his dog, you know what I mean? The diabolic kid, his story changed. He said, I have these pieces of tape all around the house so I know where I am, and there's no mistaking it. They're different textures. I was here at the time, and it was like, oh, you know what? I must have been mistaken about that. Oh, he's the killer. He's the killer. There's no, you know.
Well, you have to consider that, like, that's looking from the perspective of the investigators. To the investigators, them changing aspects of their story is, they're hiding an alibi. But if you look from the perspective of the family, it's just, I'm going to slightly change the truth because I don't want to have to talk about the fact that I got into a domestic slap fight with my husband, or I don't want to talk about the fact that I could hear my mom and dad shouting from outside or inside the house. That's not details like you really want to share with anyone, especially people who are going to use it against you in a courtroom.
That's right. Yeah. So you're defending yourself.
Yeah.
You're defending your honor. And plus you're not ready to do this. When these police come to you, you don't have time to rehearse. Going to ask you questions. What happened here? What happened there? When were you this? When you do, you know, you see that all the time in court dramas, in actual court.
Yeah.
Where they say, where were you on this day? Are you kidding me? I don't even remember what I had for lunch. Where were you on a certain day?
Yeah.
When you get right down to it, the story is actually very thin.
Yeah. I love the writing of this film because I feel like it's hard to simulate real human conversations or real human interactions without accidentally parodying them, you know, sounding more like an imitation. But in this one, the writing was phenomenal. I felt like these were real conversations. These were real struggles, real interactions that they were having between humans. And because of that, you could really feel, I guess, like the humanity behind it all. And one of my favorite parts of the movie was the fight that they have in the kitchen when they're playing the audio of that fight that they have in the kitchen.
That's brutal.
If I'm going to be honest, I've had fights like that with partners of my own.
I can definitely not picture you having a fight like that. That's not the BJ I know.
Well, that's.
I'll have to get you drunk because they did a lot of drinking, that couple, right?
Yeah, they were. That's for sure. But that's the point. Is like they're trying to. Everyone wants to look better than the way they look on the outside. But when your real human interactions are being put on a literal trial, when the words that you said behind closed doors are being put on a literal trial, the truth comes out. The human that you really are comes out. And I love that fight scene in the kitchen because that's a real argument that I've heard from a lot of couples, a lot of people who are really struggling, you know, people who are going through declining relationships.
That's sad. I'm sorry that you had to go through that ever.
Yeah.
That's not good. But, you know, in California, that wouldn't be admissible.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to record somebody without telling them.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting thing to me. But this is France.
That's another aspect you can sort of catch on to. It's interesting that he started recording towards the last 6 months of his life. Maybe he thought that
she was going to kill him.
He needed evidence, or something was going to happen to him.
She was going to kill him.
They just sort of found a USB of all the audio recordings towards the end of the trial, and he just was recording for some reason. Maybe that's another aspect to consider right there.
It's funny how evidence comes out as the trial continues.
Yeah.
One of the things that occurred to me in thinking about this movie was there was a plagiarism issue.
Okay.
And he was a failed writer and she was a successful writer, and she had used some of his material in her successful writing. And he didn't appreciate the plagiarism. He now, when he allowed her to do it, he thought nothing of it. But once she was a success, he resented her for it.
I wouldn't say, however, that she plagiarized from his book. He said in that argument that they have, he says that he stopped. She recommended that if he wanted to start writing again, go back to the book that he stopped writing. He said, you plundered from it. And she said, I was inspired by your book. There's a difference. The only reason that you see it as I'm plundering from your book is because you want to see yourself as a victim. You stopped writing not because of the circumstances around you. If you wanted to be a great writer, you would have kept going. You stopped writing because you lost motivation, and now you're just looking to be a victim.
And that was really true.
Yeah.
He was a real wimp, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was.
He was a real crybaby.
Yeah.
And that's another degeneration. That's another anatomy of a fall, right?
Yeah, right there.
So the marriage was failing. He was having personal failure. Mm-hmm. And she was too, because she couldn't keep it all together.
Yeah.
She wanted to be the artist that she was, but in order to be that artist, she couldn't be a doting mother and a doting wife.
Yeah.
She had to have her time to herself to do her creative thing, and everybody else's needs had to be put on a shelf during that time.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't put my needs on the shelf. And she's like, that's your decision. That's you. I didn't compel you to stop working.
I think it's really interesting that you said that that's another anatomy of a fall. It's like he's supposed to be a man. He's supposed to be someone who can take care of himself. All of a sudden, it's like, why don't you see me as I am? It's like, why don't you, see me? And she goes, I do see you. I just don't see you with as much pity as you see yourself. You're right. He degenerates from who's supposed to be a man into basically a man-child.
Good job, BJ. Holy smokes. Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. That was a big factor in the whole story, and that supports the suicide.
Yeah.
Where he finally had his final hissy fit.
Yeah.
And, the thing that I didn't buy about the suicide was, who the heck jumps out of a third-story attic window? The fall wasn't far.
Maybe he was...
I actually think I could make that jump, you know what I mean? Maybe a broken leg in there, but...
Maybe that's why he hit the shed. He was aiming for the shed on the way down, maybe to...
Right, like he really didn't want to fall. Like it was a very half-hearted suicide. And who would allow your child to find you?
I know.
If you're going to do that, go out in the woods somewhere and then leave a note for with the police, like, go 1 mile east of the thing and find my body.
It's another anatomy of a fall right there. Child's innocence is lost. That's...
Oh, man, that kid?
Yeah.
Yeah, he grew up real fast, didn't he?
I really liked the fact that... even though he was blind, a lot of the scenes they're referencing certain events or scenes, or even talking about scenarios about how he could have died or what things might have led up to him dying. And even though he can't see, it pans in on Daniel and he pictures it in his mind. And so it's like, even though he has maybe almost the luxury of not seeing what's happening around him, especially his dad's dead body, he can still see it in his mind, and he's still losing his innocence through that.
Yeah, it was terrible.
Yeah.
It was terrible. But I even at the very end, the very last scene in the thing, he hugs his mom.
Yeah.
And he's just got this really deadpan look on his face or something. I said, I'm still going. That kid's the killer. That kid is the killer.
The blind thing is just an act.
You don't know, because he wasn't completely. Remember, he was trying to read the labels in the thing when he poisoned his dog?
Yeah.
And that whole scene, the poison in the dog, where he's experimented because he thought that the dog he thought his father had taken sleeping pills and thrown them up, and then the dog ate the vomit.
That's actually a good point. Most psychopaths or serial killers, they start off by experimenting or torturing animals first before they move. That's a good point, actually. There is a lot of open-endedness to this.
The hug at the end where it's just him and his mom.
Yeah.
Like, I thought maybe she was next, like...
If that's what they were trying to show, maybe the director was trying to show, because the director told the main actress, Sandra Hüller, she wasn't going to reveal what actually happened to the dad. She never revealed about whether or not the mom was guilty, or about whether he was murdered at all, or if it was an accident or a suicide. Maybe if that was what the director secretly had in mind. That is some phenomenal acting by the Daniel there.
And that's a phenomenal strategy by that director.
Yeah.
In other words, you're not going to know the end of this till we get to where we shoot in the end. The director didn't tell her what the end was, so while she was in the trial, she did not yet know how the movie was going to turn out.
Sandra Hüller on set kept asking the director whether or not her character was guilty, and the director.
So in other words, she knew that she would be found not guilty.
Yes.
But she wasn't sure if she in reality was actually guilty.
Because she was acquitted, but it was never revealed about what was the cause of death behind her husband.
Oh no.
It's very open-ended there.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I did like that, and I thought that was pretty grounded in reality too.
It depends on what you like out of a movie, how you're going to react to this, because you're right about it being very static.
Yeah.
There was no really heavy drama moments, even though there was phenomenally drama moments. I mean, what I'm saying doesn't make sense. Like you said, the fight scene in the kitchen, that was a tremendously dramatic moment. And it was really cool that we didn't see the fight scene. It was a recording of the fight scene that she was listening to. Mm-hmm. So she is horrified herself, like, my God, this is me. You know, it's like when you sing into a microphone and you think you sound awful. She didn't remember it. It's one thing to remember it. It's one thing to relive it in a recording.
That's what I really liked about the concept of the movie. It's called Anatomy of a Fall, and they're picking apart every aspect of what caused the husband to fall. But because of that, and they're trying to look into the wife as to whether or not she killed him, they have to pick apart every aspect of the decline of their marriage, the anatomy of the fall of their marriage as well. And it's a crazy thing to have your marriage on trial.
Right.
And you have to relive some of the worst memories or some of the worst interactions you ever had with your partner. And
justify them.
Yeah.
I mean, she tried to minimize it all time. We had good times. It wasn't always bad. You know, it was. This is out of context. Sure, we had a fight here, but
whether or not she wasn't found guilty in court for murdering him, but maybe at the end of it, she definitely felt guilty about. She convicted herself of being guilty for how her marriage went or how she interacted in her marriage.
Because it ended up with the death of someone she loved.
Yeah. The murder aspect, the murder mystery, you definitely have to go back, watch it a second time, and try to pick up on little clues. Put on that investigator cap, like you're saying, the detective cap. Maybe figure out, piece together more of the puzzle if he was murdered or if it was an accident or if it was suicide.
Man found dead. People investigate the circumstances. A woman is accused. Mm-hmm. And is acquitted for lack of definitive evidence. That's it.
Yeah. All the drama comes from the characters. It's that human tension of being put under a spotlight and then having everything you said to another person or having every interaction you've ever said be scrutinized so heavily. And that's
interpreted by a capricious board.
Yeah. There's a scene where they have Daniel on the stand, and he's between the prosecutor and the defense lawyer, and he's giving his account of what happened. He's answering questions, and then the prosecutor and the defense start going at it, and then the camera, every time Daniel turns to either the defense or the prosecutor, whoever's talking, he keeps swiveling his head. The camera keeps following his face as best as it can back and forth, and you get this sense that he's being torn. He's being torn between his two sides. He's being tossed, he's going through an emotional thing, and he's just being, sort of tossed from either side.
Would you turn your head if you couldn't see? See, that's why I said that kid can see.
He's turning his head towards the sound. He's blind, not deaf. I think Daniel, the kid, did a great job, phenomenal job. Maybe even did a very good job of hiding himself as a sort of mastermind, manipulator, murderer, psychopath kid. But Sandra Hüller, I felt phenomenal performance. I really likened it to Scarlett Johansson's role in Marriage Story, even a little bit of Adam Driver's role in that story, and especially in that fight scene, which I felt like was very similar to the fight scene they had in Marriage Story. But this is genuinely, I felt like a woman who is caught between a rock and a hard place. She has to confront these really tough moments that she had in her marriage and also try to defend herself from being claimed a murderer.
Yeah. and also maintain a relationship with her son who is hurting and she can't help.
Yeah.
Oh, that was so brutal.
There's so much.
That was brutal.
Because all the tension, it comes from these characters being under this amount of pressure. It relies heavily on the actors to carry the film, and Sandra Hüller did an amazing job. It's weird to say, but it was a very human performance where I was completely in belief that this is a real person.
I don't think that's weird to say. I think you're spot on.
Yeah. The script writing is breathtaking. These are real, believable words, sentences, outbursts, and it takes a great performance to really deliver it with believability.
In a relationship, you know something about somebody, but it's kind of taboo to say because it's kind of hurtful to say.
Yeah.
But when the fight escalates to the point where it has to come out, it has to finally be put on the table where we can look at it.
Yeah.
And that's what she did.
Yeah.
She said, your problem is you're immature.
Yeah.
You don't see yourself as you really are. You blame everybody in the world for your failure. You don't accept responsibility for your own failure.
Yeah.
It's I'm not sure if it's narcissism or exactly what makes you that way, but she really did put it out on the table in that fight. She really did tell him everything about himself where there was no longer any, tell us how you really feel.
Yeah.
She really did get it out finally.
Yeah.
And that was cool. And that was part of the excellent writing.
I used to have I have still struggle with trying to be a mature person. And so here, it was kind of a very vivid, sort of uncomfortable experience to watch her go on this very realistic tirade, this very realistic things that she was saying, because these are things that I've heard said to me. And just what she was saying, things like you're immature, you want to see yourself as the victim, you're just making excuses as to why your life is the way it is. She says you wake up, you're 40 years old and you're looking for someone to blame. And I just thought, wow, that's uncomfortable to hear.
Yeah, that hit you in a hard place.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't imagine that about you. I find that an interesting. I'm glad you shared that.
Yeah.
You're a little bit vulnerable there with that. But you're going to have that in a movie like this.
Yeah.
So
I think if a movie, you're right. It almost comes off a little. It comes off a little mundane. The event, the storylines are a little flat. None of it's really exciting. However, it's realistic and it makes you feel something. And if it makes you even feel uncomfortable in a way where you feel like
you're like being married.
It was like you feel attacked personally.
Isn't that we both had that same impression, and we both said it early on when we started to talk with each other. It was like this movie was really exciting and really dramatic without being the least bit exciting and not very dramatic.
Exactly.
Isn't that a strange phenomenon?
It is. If you go into this thinking that there's going to be a lot of any sort of action sequences, any sort of very, it's not going to be A Few Good Men where you have Tom Cruise,
right,
going, I want the truth in front of,
Yeah, you don't see the guy thrown out the window or fall out the window.
No, it's a very dry procedural investigation of a murder, and it's a thorough analysis of a declining marriage, of a struggling family. And that's not very exciting if you come into it thinking you're going to get this grandiose trial movie.
You know what I love? It just goes to show you don't need a really big budget to make a really phenomenal movie.
Yeah. With this kind of movie, you have to have patience. You have to be open.
Right.
Really.
I know people who would have turned it off.
Yeah, exactly.
Who halfway through, like, this isn't going anywhere.
From a certain perspective, 100%, it's a movie you could just sleep through.
Right.
Yeah. However, if you go into it with the right, I guess, almost stomach, I would say you're going to find yourself very impressed and almost breathtaking, I would say.
Yeah, it's a strange phenomenon.
It is. This is more about us, really, than the events itself. And because of that, it's not for everyone, I would say, but it's something I think everyone should see. Yeah, I would give it an 8 out of 10.
I agree. I'll settle at an 8. Great. Yeah, that's what I was thinking the whole entire time.
Thank you for watching The Real Generation Gap. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. And make sure to leave a comment down below. Was it a suicide, a murder, or was it really just an accident? And do you agree with Fred? Do you think that maybe Daniel their blind kid was secretly a master manipulator behind the scenes? Let us know down below. Thank you for watching.